A story now circulating through royal commentary claims that Carol Middleton confronted Queen Camilla after an alleged incident involving Princess Charlotte of Wales. The details are dramatic, but none has been publicly confirmed. Even so, the account raises a powerful question. What happens when royal rank collides with a grandmother's instinct to protect a child? At the center of the story is not simply a disagreement between two adult women. It is the boundary between palace authority and family responsibility, made especially sensitive when a child is involved. According to the circulating version, a private gathering at Windsor Castle was meant to recognize something positive in Charlotte's young life. Instead, the occasion allegedly became tense after Camilla criticized the child in a manner said to have been humiliating. Buckingham Palace has not confirmed that such a luncheon occurred as described, that the Queen directed insulting remarks toward Charlotte, or that Carol intervened. The reference account presents a detailed scene, but those details should be understood as unverified narrative claims rather than established royal history. Yet the story has attracted attention because it places Carol in a position rarely given to someone outside the titled royal family. She is not a working royal, constitutional advisor, or palace official. She is Catherine's mother and Charlotte's grandmother. The official biography of Catherine, Princess of Wales, identifies her as the eldest child of Michael and Carol Middleton, a family connection that remains important as she and William raise their children. That distinction gives the allegation its emotional force. Inside a royal residence, protocol determines who enters first, where people sit, and how they address the sovereign and queen. But grandmotherhood follows a different code. It responds to vulnerability, particularly when a child appears overwhelmed and the adults around her feel constrained by the setting. Was Carol confronting a queen, as the dramatic retelling suggests, or simply refusing to allow royal etiquette to silence an ordinary moral response? The answer remains unknown because the incident itself is unverified. But the question reaches beyond the alleged exchange. It asks whether membership in the monarchy should ever require a parent or grandparent to remain silent when tradition appears to conflict with a child's emotional safety. For Catherine, that tension would be deeply personal. Her public role requires composure, restraint, and respect for the hierarchy headed by King Charles III and Queen Camilla. Her role as a mother demands something more immediate. If a relative criticized Charlotte harshly, Catherine would not be responding only as the Princess of Wales. She would be deciding how to protect her daughter without allowing a private dispute to become an institutional crisis. Prince William, the Prince of Wales, would face an equally difficult calculation. As the future king, he must preserve a workable relationship with the present sovereign and queen. As Charlotte's father, however, he would be expected to place his child's welfare before palace unity. Silence could appear weak. Open confrontation could deepen division. A private restriction could protect the children while creating questions about trust inside the House of Windsor. And then there is Charles. The reference account places the king at the emotional center because it claims he did not immediately defend his wife. That detail has not been verified, but within the story it changes everything. A monarch's silence can suggest shock, uncertainty, an attempt to prevent escalation, or quiet recognition that a line has been crossed. Which interpretation viewers accept depends largely on what they already believe about the relationships inside this blended royal family. Public evidence offers a more restrained picture than the alleged drama. In April 2026, Charles, Camilla, William, Catherine, and their children appeared together at the Easter service at Windsor Castle, where coverage recorded a warm public interaction between the king and Charlotte. That does not prove perfect private harmony, but it shows why claims of a complete family rupture should not be treated as confirmed. Still, carefully managed public unity cannot answer every private question. The monarchy has always separated what the public sees from what relatives may experience behind closed doors. A shared procession can demonstrate continuity without revealing whether difficult conversations have occurred. Equally, an anonymous story can transform ordinary tension into cruelty through details no independent source has verified. The challenge is to examine the meaning without pretending the allegation has been proven. That meaning begins with Carol Middleton's unusual place in the royal story. She represents the world Catherine came from: close family involvement, practical support, and a style of grandparenting less governed by court tradition. Her presence has often been interpreted as part of the stability surrounding the Wales children. To admirers, that makes her protective. To critics, it can be portrayed as outside influence entering a family that once guarded its inner circle fiercely. This is where the first layer of conflict becomes larger than a reported remark. The issue is not simply whether Camilla said something cruel, or whether Carol answered back. It is a struggle between two ideas of family authority. One comes from rank, ceremony, and the position of the reigning queen. The other comes from emotional closeness and the willingness to intervene without waiting for palace permission. If the alleged confrontation never happened, the popularity of the story still reveals something important. Many viewers find it plausible that a protective grandmother would stand against a powerful royal figure, and that William and Catherine would support her. That instinct suggests public sympathy may follow the Wales family more readily than formal hierarchy whenever the well-being of the children is involved. But that leaves the most sensitive question unanswered. Why has Queen Camilla been placed in the story as a threatening figure, and why does Carol appear as the person capable of stopping her? To understand how that narrative gained such emotional power, we have to look at the older tensions surrounding class, acceptance, and the Middleton family's place inside the future monarchy. That older tension begins with a truth the monarchy has never entirely resolved. Catherine entered royal life from outside the aristocratic world, and her family entered with her. The Middletons were not merely relatives appearing at weddings and christenings. They became part of the emotional structure surrounding the future king, the future queen, and the children expected to carry the monarchy into another generation. For some observers, that closeness represented stability. William had experienced loss, intense public scrutiny, and the peculiar loneliness of being raised as an heir. Catherine's family offered something different. Ordinary meals, involved grandparents, and a private environment less governed by ceremony. Carol's importance, therefore, developed not through royal appointment, but through trust earned inside the Wales household. That is precisely what makes the alleged confrontation so symbolically powerful. A queen possesses formal precedence. A maternal grandmother possesses no official place in the monarchy at all. Yet when the issue becomes the protection of a child, ceremonial rank may suddenly matter less than emotional authority. In the account now circulating, Carol does not prevail because she outranks Camilla. She prevails because she is presented as recognizing a boundary that everyone else has hesitated to defend. The story claims that tension began during a private gathering at Windsor, where Charlotte was allegedly interrupted and criticized while discussing a personal achievement. None of those details has been confirmed by the palace, and there is no verified evidence that Camilla attempted to humiliate her. But within the narrative, the moment serves a larger purpose. It portrays the queen as enforcing an older model of royal childhood, one based upon discipline, restraint, and the suppression of individual attention. Carol, by contrast, is placed on the side of a more modern understanding of family life. Children may still learn manners and responsibility, but they are not expected to surrender every sign of personality simply because they were born near the throne. That difference reflects a genuine evolution in how royal children are presented. William and Catherine have frequently emphasized family routines, education, and their children's privacy, attempting to prepare them for public life without allowing public life to consume them. If the alleged criticism occurred, it would therefore have touched more than Charlotte's feelings. It would have challenged the parenting philosophy of the Prince and Princess of Wales. A remark about behavior could be heard as criticism of Catherine's upbringing, Carol's influence, and the decision to raise the children with greater emotional freedom than earlier generations often received. Was the reported exchange really about etiquette, or was it interpreted as a struggle over who has the right to shape the next generation? That question explains why the story quickly expands beyond one dining room. Charlotte is not simply a granddaughter caught between adults. She is third in line to the throne, growing up under expectations that combine royal tradition with the very different values of her maternal family. The Middleton influence has long attracted fascination because it sits so close to the future of the crown without being controlled by it. Carol and Michael Middleton do not hold titles, yet their relationship with the Wales children gives them access to a part of royal life that court officials cannot manufacture. They represent continuity of another kind, the private family world to which Catherine and William can retreat when royal responsibility becomes overwhelming. That closeness can reassure the public, but it may also create discomfort among those who believe monarchy should remain guarded by its own traditions. Every institution protects its boundaries, and the royal household has historically been wary of outsiders becoming too influential. A family with no constitutional role can still shape the character, confidence, and emotional well-being of a future sovereign. That influence is invisible, but it may prove more lasting than many official appointments. Camilla occupies an equally complicated position within this structure. She entered the royal family through a relationship that carried decades of controversy and was required to build acceptance gradually. Her status now comes from marriage to the sovereign, but her relationship with William's children belongs to a blended family shaped by difficult history. Any allegation that she treated Charlotte cruelly therefore activates suspicions formed long before the child was born, whether those suspicions are fair or supported by evidence. This is one reason the account must be handled carefully. It assigns detailed language, motives, and expressions to people inside a private setting without independent confirmation. It describes calculated cruelty, visible satisfaction, and a confrontation witnessed by senior royals, yet Buckingham Palace has made no public statement verifying any of it. Repeating those elements as fact would turn an unproven story into an accusation against identifiable individuals. Still, the narrative's popularity reveals where public sympathy is likely to move if conflict involving the whale's children is ever believed to be real. Many viewers would instinctively side with the parents and grandparents protecting them, particularly after years of discussion about the emotional damage experienced by earlier royal generations. The institution may value hierarchy, but the public increasingly judges royal behavior through expectations applied to every family. Adults should protect children, and power should not excuse cruelty. For William, that public instinct carries strategic significance. His future reign will depend partly upon whether people believe he has learned from the painful experiences of his own childhood. Protecting George, Charlotte, and Louis is therefore both a parental duty and part of the moral identity he is building as a future monarch. If he were ever perceived as allowing palace protocol to override their well-being, the damage would reach far beyond a private disagreement. Catherine faces a different pressure. Any conflict involving her mother could be portrayed as the Middleton family challenging royal authority. Yet distancing herself from Carol during a moment of alleged mistreatment could appear emotionally unnatural. The Princess of Wales would be required to balance loyalty upwards towards the sovereign's household with responsibility downwards towards her daughter, all while knowing that silence and confrontation would each be interpreted politically. And Charles would sit at the most difficult point of all. Supporting Camilla could risk appearing indifferent to his granddaughter. Supporting the Wales family could be interpreted as abandoning his wife. The reference story resolves that dilemma by claiming the king remained silent and later apologized to Carol, but those claims remain unverified. What matters at this stage is why such an outcome feels so consequential. It would suggest that the future monarch's family had become powerful enough to establish boundaries even against the reigning queen. That possibility changes the entire story. The conflict would no longer be between Camilla and an outspoken grandmother. It would be between the authority attached to the current reign and the protective independence developing around the next one. And once that interpretation enters the conversation, a far more serious question emerges. If William believed his children required protection from someone inside the royal household, how far would he be prepared to go? The answer, according to the circulating account, was that William would go far enough to create a formal boundary around his children. The story claims that after the alleged incident at Windsor, the Prince of Wales contacted his private security team and instructed them to prevent Queen Camilla or members of her household from approaching George, Charlotte, or Louis unless he or Catherine was present. Buckingham Palace has not confirmed that such an order exists, and there is no public evidence that it was issued. Yet the allegation is revealing because it imagines a future king using authority inside his own household against the wife of the reigning monarch. That possibility changes the balance of the story. A title determines precedence, but security determines access. If the account were accurate, Camilla could remain queen and stand beside Charles, while still being excluded from the most private spaces surrounding the Wales children. The distinction would be extraordinary, not because it removed her rank, but because it would show William placing his responsibilities as a father above expectations of family deference. William and Catherine managed their own staff, residences, and protective arrangements within the broader royal structure. The closer William moves towards the throne, The more significant that independence becomes, because it allows the future monarch to establish principles before he inherits sovereign authority. Would he use that freedom to protect his children from a confirmed threat? Almost certainly, as any parent would. But the controversy lies in the fact that the alleged threat is not an outsider. It is the Queen. That turns a private safeguarding decision into a symbolic challenge to the unity of the present reign. Even an unconfirmed restriction would suggest that trust had broken down at the highest level of the family. Catherine's position would become equally consequential. She has spent years balancing royal duty with a determination to give her children a stable upbringing. If she supported such a boundary, it would not necessarily mean she was seeking conflict with Camilla. It could reflect a belief that royal status should never place an adult beyond accountability where a child is concerned. Yet in palace terms, the difference between protection and rebellion can depend on who controls the narrative. Carol's involvement complicates that narrative further. The reference account claims she preserved the crushed flowers from the alleged confrontation, carrying them away as a visible reminder of what had happened. That detail remains unverified, yet it functions as powerful symbolism. Evidence held not by a court official, but by a grandmother who refused to let the moment be softened into a misunderstanding. In royal institutions, uncomfortable events are often absorbed through careful language. A confrontation becomes a disagreement. A humiliation becomes a misunderstanding. The alleged actions attributed to Carol and William reject that process. One is said to have named the behavior directly, the other is said to have created a consequence. If true, the Wales family had decided that private clarity mattered more than public smoothness. But such a decision would carry long-term risks. Charles could view it as a challenge to his wife. Camilla's household could interpret it as an attempt to diminish the Queen. Courtiers might fear that separate centers of authority were forming around the monarch and his heir. Once royal households begin protecting themselves from one another, ordinary coordination can resemble factional conflict. William's reputation is closely connected to his role as a protective father and to the lessons many believe he drew from his own childhood. If credible evidence ever showed that one of his children had been mistreated, viewers would expect decisive action. Yet if he acted against Camilla on the basis of an exaggerated incident, he could be accused of allowing family emotion to destabilize the crown. This is why the alleged security order matters, even if it cannot be substantiated. It expresses a deeper fear inside modern monarchy, that the next generation may no longer accept silence as the price of unity. William and Catherine have grown up in an era when mental well-being, childhood privacy, and emotional boundaries carry greater public importance than they did in earlier royal households. If that shift is real, it would mark more than a disagreement over Charlotte. It would suggest that the culture of the next reign is already taking shape. The future monarchy might rest not only on continuity with tradition, but on a willingness to draw lines that previous generations avoided. That could strengthen public trust, yet it could also deepen the distance between William's household and those surrounding the king. And then comes the contradiction at the heart of the story. William could establish boundaries, Catherine could support them, and Carol could defend her granddaughter, but none of those actions would settle the matter without Charles. As sovereign, husband, father, and grandfather, he would be the only person capable of preventing a family rupture from becoming an institutional one. The reference account claims that his response came through a private telephone call to Carol the following day. That conversation has not been verified. But if the reported apology occurred, it would represent the moment when the king stopped being a silent witness and quietly chose which side of the boundary he believed had been crossed. And once that possibility entered the story, the consequences moved into far more dangerous territory. The reported telephone call, if it occurred as described, would have changed the meaning of everything that came before it. Until that point, the alleged confrontation could still be dismissed as an emotional family dispute inside a private royal setting. But an apology from the king to Carol Middleton would transform it into something far more serious, an acknowledgement that the boundary crossed was not simply social but moral. Buckingham Palace has not confirmed that Charles telephoned Carol, accepted responsibility, or told her she had been right to intervene. The reference account offers no independently verified record of such a conversation. Yet within the story, the call becomes decisive because it places the sovereign between loyalties that cannot be satisfied at the same time. He is Camilla's husband, Charlotte's grandfather, William's father, and the head of an institution whose future rests with the Wales family. If Charles had supported Carol privately, the consequences would extend beyond a personal apology. It would mean that the king had accepted the principle behind William's reported boundary. Royal rank could not excuse conduct believed to have harmed a child. That would not remove Camilla's title or alter her constitutional place, but it would expose a limit to the protection Charles has historically provided her. For decades, Camilla's position has depended upon the king's confidence. She built her own charitable record and gradually earned respect, but her place at the center of the monarchy ultimately comes from her marriage to the sovereign. If the account is accurate, the most damaging consequence would not be formal punishment. It would be the discovery that Charles's support was no longer automatic when the next generation was involved. That possibility would place the royal household under immediate pressure. Advisors would need to prevent a private disagreement from becoming a public contest between the king's household and the household of his heir. Any visible distance between Camilla and the Wales family could invite speculation, while an unusually warm appearance could be interpreted as damage control. The palace would face the impossible task of demonstrating unity without appearing to stage it. Royal silence can deepen that danger. The absence of a denial may be treated as confirmation, while an official response can give an unverified story greater visibility. Palace communications, therefore, tend to avoid detailed engagement with private claims, but that caution leaves the public to judge the characters through existing loyalties and old wounds. Those loyalties do not begin on equal ground. William and Catherine are viewed through the future of the crown, while Carol is understood primarily as a protective grandmother. Camilla carries a more complicated public history, so allegations against her can attach themselves to older suspicions. That imbalance does not establish guilt, but it shapes whom audiences instinctively believe. Would the palace recognize that danger before it became unmanageable? Its priority would not be to decide which adult had won the confrontation. It would be to protect Charlotte from becoming the center of a global narrative about family hostility. A child cannot be expected to carry the symbolic burden of a dispute between the reigning queen and the future king's household. William's alleged response, therefore, carries competing interpretations. Supporters may see a father creating a necessary safeguard. Critics may see an heir building an independent power structure before inheriting the throne. Neither interpretation can be confirmed because the reported security restriction remains unverified. Yet the story reveals how easily parental authority and royal authority can become entangled. Historically, heirs have maintained households with their own advisors and loyalties, sometimes producing tension with the sovereign. Today, every sign of separation can be amplified instantly. A private instruction, if leaked or invented, becomes evidence of a palace faction. The strongest turning point in the reference account comes when Charles allegedly visits Camilla after speaking with Carol and refuses to offer the defense she expects. The scene remains entirely unconfirmed, but symbolically, it imagines the king seeing his wife not through decades of loyalty, but through the consequences of one alleged act. Silence, in that version, becomes judgment. If such a moment occurred, Camilla's isolation would not need to be announced. It could appear through reduced access, colder private relations, or a narrowing of influence around matters involving the Wales children. Yet those outcomes are speculative, and public appearances have not established a complete rupture. The danger lies in confusing a compelling narrative with evidence. Still, the story's power comes from what it suggests about succession. The future monarchy is not only being prepared through ceremonies and official responsibilities, it is also being shaped through boundaries, who has access to the children, whose judgment William trusts, and what behavior the next royal household will refuse to normalize. In that sense, the alleged confrontation becomes a test of the culture surrounding the next reign. For Charles, the risk is profound. If he appears to protect Camilla regardless of circumstance, he could damage trust with his son and grandchildren. If he appears to abandon her too quickly, he could weaken the partnership at the center of his own reign. A monarch trained to place duty above private emotion may discover that family duty now points in two opposing directions. But even the alleged apology does not answer the most important question. The real consequence would not be whether Carol received vindication or Camilla experienced humiliation. It would be whether William had begun exercising the moral authority of a future king before receiving the crown itself. And if Charles quietly accepted that authority, then the balance inside the royal family may already have shifted in a way no palace statement could conceal. Because what happened next, according to the story, was not merely the aftermath of a confrontation. It was the moment when the current queen's formal rank appeared to collide with the future king's control over his own family, and the final meaning of that collision could reshape how the monarchy understands power, protection, and loyalty for an entire generation. The collision matters because it exposes a change the monarchy can no longer postpone. The next reign will not be shaped only by inheritance, ceremony, or constitutional preparation. It will also be shaped by the boundaries William and Catherine establish around their family, and by whether those boundaries are respected before William becomes king. If the circulating account is inaccurate, then no palace rupture occurred, no exclusion order was imposed, and no private apology altered the balance between the households. Buckingham Palace has not confirmed any of those claims. Yet the story still reveals a powerful expectation surrounding the Prince of Wales. Many people believe he should build a different emotional culture from the one in which earlier generations were raised. That expectation is now part of his future authority. The public does not judge a modern heir only by speeches, military appointments, or ceremonial discipline. It also watches how he treats his wife, protects his children, and responds when royal tradition appears to conflict with emotional well-being. William's private choices therefore carry public meaning long before they become decisions of state. Catherine's role within that changing culture may be equally important. Her family background has offered the Wales children a connection to life beyond palace hierarchy, and Carol's place in the narrative represents that alternative source of stability. She has no constitutional standing, yet her influence comes from intimacy, continuity, and the trust of her daughter's household. In the modern monarchy, those qualities may matter more than courtiers once expected. This does not mean the Middleton family is replacing the royal household or secretly directing the future of the crown. It means the next generation is being shaped by more than one tradition. George, Charlotte, and Louis are growing up within the institution, but they are also surrounded by grandparents and relatives whose authority comes from family connection rather than royal rank. That combination may produce a monarchy less emotionally isolated than those of the past. But it may also create friction. The crown depends upon discipline, controlled access, and clearly recognized hierarchy. A close outside family can offer warmth while also complicating the palace's ability to manage private life. If disagreements arise, advisors may struggle to determine whether they are dealing with ordinary family boundaries or an emerging division between the present court and the future one. That is why the unverified story assigns such importance to Charles's alleged response. The king would not simply be deciding whether Carol spoke appropriately to his wife. He would be deciding what kind of authority deserved protection when rank and responsibility pointed in different directions. Supporting Camilla would defend the order of his own household. Supporting the Wales family would acknowledge that the culture surrounding the next reign already possesses legitimacy of its own. Perhaps the most consequential interpretation is that Charles would not need to choose publicly. Monarchies often resolve their most sensitive pressures through quiet adjustments rather than dramatic judgments. Access changes, invitations become less frequent, private arrangements are revised, and households learn which boundaries will no longer be questioned. No title is removed, yet influence can still narrow. If anything resembling that process were occurring, royal observers would watch for subtle signs rather than an official announcement. They would notice whether Camilla continued appearing comfortably with the Wales children, whether Carol remained present at important family moments, and whether Charles demonstrated visible warmth towards both households. They would also watch William, because his response would reveal whether the reported conflict had faded or become part of a lasting shift. There is another risk the palace cannot ignore. Princess Charlotte should not become a symbol in an adult struggle she did not create. The more sensational the claims become, the more a young girl's imagined distress is used to support competing judgments about Camilla, Carol, and the future king. Even a story framed as protection can become intrusive when the child at its center has never publicly described the event. That may be the clearest reason to separate emotional meaning from factual certainty. The alleged details are compelling, but they remain unsupported by any palace confirmation or independently established account. The responsible conclusion is not that Camilla attacked Charlotte or that Carol defeated the Queen. It is that the popularity of the story reveals how strongly audiences now expect the monarchy to place children's well-being above reputation management. This expectation could shape the crown for decades. A monarchy that responds to vulnerability with protection may appear more humane and better equipped for the modern world. One that retreats into silence whenever family welfare becomes uncomfortable risks reviving some of the institution's most damaging historical patterns. The public remembers what happened when earlier royal suffering was treated as a problem to contain rather than a reality to understand. For Camilla, the wider lesson is equally serious. Formal rank can secure her position beside Charles, but it cannot guarantee public sympathy in every dispute. Her legacy will depend partly upon whether she is seen as helping the family move forward or as defending an older culture of hierarchy against those preparing to inherit it. That judgment may be unfairly shaped by rumors, but royal reputation has always been influenced by stories the palace cannot fully control. For Carol, the narrative creates a very different legacy. She becomes the untitled grandmother willing to say what titled figures could not. Whether that confrontation happened or not, the image resonates because it suggests that moral courage does not require institutional authority. In a family defined by precedents, the most powerful person in the room may sometimes be the one prepared to ignore it. And that brings the entire story back to its central question. Was this truly a hidden confrontation that forced Charles to choose between his wife and his granddaughter's protectors? Or is it an unverified drama built around a genuine transformation already taking place inside the monarchy? Perhaps the most important shift is not who won an argument, but the growing belief that the future crown must protect the people inside it before protecting the appearance of unity. So what do you think? Was Carol Middleton defending Princess Charlotte from a real palace conflict, or has the story transformed broader family tensions into something far more dramatic than the evidence supports? And if William is already establishing a more protective culture around his children, what could that mean for the monarchy he may one day lead? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you have enjoyed this full royal documentary compilation, subscribe to the Prime Expedition and turn on notifications so you never miss our next in-depth royal story. Because the future of the crown may not be decided only by who inherits it, but by what they refuse to sacrifice in order to preserve it.